Dave, I guess I just want to check and see if we have people who wanted to make public comments or ask questions on that item.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We have the one comment from yesterday, and I can bring that up very quickly. So we have the actual comment from Sean McManus. There was a slight error yesterday. So this is his question or comment. It was, I'm concerned that in the absence of a FIS in a particular area or areas, that the TAC for that area can potentially be increased based off of extrapolated data. For example, in 2021, there were no FIS carried out in Area 4, and yet the TAC was increased in many of the areas in Area 4 for 2022. There were no FIS carried out in Area 4 in 2023. My hope is there would be a change in harvest policy to prevent stakeholders from overfishing an area that lacks a FIS. Without a FIS in Area 4, it feels as though we are chasing fish which aren't there. And so I don't know if Dr. Stewart, you wanted to make any additional comment?
No, perhaps just to clarify that in Area 4, C, D, and E, we do have direct data from the NOAA Fisheries Trawl Survey. But certainly for 2023, we don't have direct data in IPHC Regulatory Area 4B. We also benefit in 4A from a small amount of NOAA Fisheries Trawl Survey data on the northern 4A edge.
And that's all we have, Chair, from public comment questions overnight.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. So it may be worth just seeing if we want to have a little bit more commissioner discussion around the FIS issues. I know there were a couple of other points I thought of just on a little bit of further reflection here. So maybe I'll start out with that. So from my perspective, I think IPHC really needs to get more out of the FIS in 2024 than is contained in option 1. And of course, the challenge is that we don't currently have a way to pay for more than that. And that's why we have been looking at a revenue neutral option, but it's frankly, something I find a bit dissatisfying. So I think the commissioners really need to rigorously explore options, and that's what at least I, as one commissioner, was attempting to do yesterday via my questions and comments. I'll say for the longer term, I like the base block design with the 5-year rotation that was presented yesterday. I think for 2024, we're likely going to need some sort of a transitional approach, and maybe for a longer period than that, depending on how successful we are in finding ways to finance something like that base block design. So I'm curious whether there is additional planning work, meaningful planning work that the Secretariat can do towards a package that would include options 1 through 4 for 2024 without locking into that package at this point, given that we aren't quite sure how we would cover the additional cost. So I'd appreciate any feedback on that from the Secretariat.
Sure, thank you, Chair. So in terms of options 1 through 4, in the inclusion of 2 and 3 would equate to about $110,000 roughly, and I'm relatively confident, the team's confident that given the margin of error for the Fishery Independent Setline Survey economics, so in terms of potential catch rates and fish sales prices and the like, that's something that is sort of lower risk in terms of potentially implementing. The addition of option 4 is quite substantial in terms of the level of risk, with a $245,000 price tag plus or minus. That brings into play just a little bit more concern and potential risk, particularly noting that even option 1 here is estimated to be plus or minus $400,000, depending on many factors in season. So I would say that the potential implementation of options 1 to 3 would not be very onerous on the Secretariat to plan for and potentially implement. And even noting that level of fiscal risk. But the addition of option 4 would need to be very carefully considered. The main challenge there, of course, is that it's very hard to get a FIS tender or a bid for Area 4 in any given year. And so if that was to be held off, I would say that the chance of getting a successful tender would decrease rapidly once we get the new year and fishermen are making their fishing operation plans. So in summary, 1 to 3, I think is relatively low risk and something we could do in any case. And we can look for various savings to ensure that that $110,000 is covered. But option 4 is a higher risk that would, and so the decision would need to be taken sooner rather. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, understood. And then I have a related question, which I guess will likely fall into the same category as your answer for option 4, and that's whether you have, or perhaps it's something you need to put together, but an incremental cost estimate for adding some degree of sampling in 4C, D, and E.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think that would fit into the same category as you said.
Yeah, so could you or maybe Kayla explain a bit on the timing and how that would work if the commission is interested in pursuing something like that? When would you need to send out the request for tender? Is there meaningful planning work that could be done in the interim? And when would we be at sort of a go, no go decision where we would absolutely need to commit one way or the
other? Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So the usual schedule is that we announce our tender specifications, ideally publishing them online right before the Christmas holiday, and then usually leaving those open for bids, ideally through right after the annual meeting. And again, ideally, that's when all bids are closed. If there were to be decisions after the new year that where additional work was planned, noting that recruiting vessels for these areas in area 4A, 4B, 4C, D, and E are generally difficult when they're announced at the standard release date. It would definitely be significantly more challenging. Noting that there's a smaller pool of vessels that generally even consider the work, and then preparing for their own commercial fishing and being less available for discussions, let alone submitting a bid.
Okay, but Kayla, the time frame is the same then. So by roughly the end of December is when you would want to put out the request for tender.
Correct.
Okay, and then once you put that out, assuming you get bids back, what would be the decision point for committing?
Thank you. The decisions are ideally made within early February and announced prior to the beginning of March.
Okay, that's helpful. And then if you were, not you personally, Kayla, but if the Secretariat were to put together an estimate for CDE for us to look at, you have a sense of when we'd be able to look at that?
No, I apologize. I didn't hear you at the end there.
Sorry, I'm just wondering if you were to put together an estimate for the incremental cost of some additional sampling in 4C, D, and E, when would we be able to look at that to get a sense of what that would cost?
I thank you. I believe that would be about a week to get those numbers together.
Okay, thanks. And then I had just one other follow-up question from yesterday, and then I'll turn to other commissioners. And that's on this slide here, options 7 and 8 are to add the oceanographic monitoring and add the trawl survey staffing. And I wonder if you all could just remind us exactly what we gain from that, from the oceanographic monitoring, and is the trawl survey staffing primarily a way to get otoliths, or is there something more than that we get from that? And I apologize, I know you've covered that before, but just as a reminder.
Do you want to cover CCAT?
Sure. So with regard to the oceanographic monitoring, we have a long-term time series that really kicked off in about 2009, a little bit of sampling previous to that maybe. The challenge there being in a year with such a reduced footprint, we'll still be missing many of the areas that would have historically been sampled. So there is certainly some value to having oceanographic monitoring with the reduced proposed footprint. But for example, if option 5 is not under consideration, 2A is one of the areas that's probably benefited most from the use of oceanographic sampling, in that we've been able to interpret the intermittent hypoxic events there much more clearly. So I would say that with the reduced footprint in 2024, this is probably not the biggest priority, adding back the oceanographic monitoring with the reduced footprint, but certainly something we would like to see resumed with a broader footprint in the future.
And then in regards to deploying staff aboard the NOAA trawl surveys, this would allow for 100% Pacific halibut sampling, at least aboard one vessel in each on each trawl survey. In comparison, if we do not deploy staff, the NOAA staff will still collect a subsample of the data. However, they'll obviously be, it's a subsample versus 100% sampling if we deploy our own staff on board.
So could you say a little bit more about that to help us understand essentially what we'd be buying for the $120,000 increment? I get that it's the difference between full sampling and a subsample, but if you could sort of characterize the value of that, that'd be helpful.
So we benefit from the biological sampling on the trawl survey. It is the one source of size at age information that we get on the youngest age classes of fish. So ages 2 through 6 aren't consistently sampled through any other source. We have in the past worked out with the trawl survey staff to collect some length and weight information and otoliths. So we would still receive a subset of that information, but it would be a much smaller sample size than we would collect if we had a sampler on board. And then in addition, when we have a sampler on board, we're generally tagging these small fish. So we would also be losing the tagging component.
Okay, thank you. And let me see if other commissioners have additional questions or comments from the FIS discussion yesterday or so far this morning.
John, I got a hand up there. I don't know if you see it.
I didn't, but go right ahead, Bob.
Yeah. Either to Kayla or Ian on the costs in front of us on revenue neutral efficiencies, option 1. Does that incorporate the lower weight per unit of effort and the lower prices we encountered during 2023?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, it does. That takes into account.
And then the last question, Ian, on the question that John was asking about the trawl survey, did we have some tagging that was useful out of that, or is that something I recall from a different effort?
Yes, that's correct, Commissioner Alverson. We have been tagging fish on the trawl survey. A subset of fish, the fish that we sample, obviously for otoliths, we can't tag, but we have been tagging at a reasonable rate when we've had an IPHC sampler on board. To date, we don't have a huge number of recoveries, and that the goal of that tagging project is not to develop quantitative migration rates, but it's to maintain some level of monitoring on migratory pathways. And so the places that we see those fish showing up later on, and I don't have the number of recoveries available off the top of my head, we do have a small number of recoveries, and it just indicates to us the areas that are still connected to the Bering Sea.
Thank you.
Other commissioner questions or comments?
Yeah, John, it's Peter. I have my hand up, but I don't know.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. Can you slide to put on slide 22? So yeah, this is the block design. Of course, this is supplemental funding, 1.5 million. One of the questions I have is it does look like some of the areas that, and I understand the block design in terms of efficiencies for the boats and bids, but it does seem like you cut out a number of areas that are revenue positive in each and every one. Maybe not everyone, but it seems like in certain years you're cutting those out. And maybe we need those still for efficiency in terms of, bringing that 1.5 million to something that, I don't know. I'm just suggesting that every year you're cutting out something that's profitable that helps pay for it. Is there a reason why, other than you don't want to, I understand the idea you don't want to pressure one area too much, but if you could just delve into that a little more.
Yeah, so thank you, Commissioner, for the question. These block designs were in response to a request from the Commission to develop roughly a 5-year rotation that would require approximately even funding across each year. So as Dr. Webster mentioned yesterday, we're rotating through the most expensive areas, but also that directive included guidance not to target revenue neutrality. So we specifically did not include areas just because they were revenue positive, but yet we just tried to balance the sampling. So there would be some potential savings if the Commission were willing to put back in areas that were identified as revenue positive to this design. That could be supplementary to this block design. I would caution that although we've provided a 5-year block design and tried to balance the revenue calculation roughly evenly across the 5 years, as we've seen, things can change rapidly. And so this should be interpreted as a guideline and not a projection of what we think might happen over the next 5 years. It could be that it's more or less expensive, and or some of these areas might have to be added or removed if you're looking at actually applying this design.
Yeah, I think we've seen that over the last number of years. We had the best intentions of next year, doing this area or that, and they get lost over time because of, financial constraints. So, I'm just looking at that as maybe some area to soften the blow in terms of what it would cost every year. So thanks very much for your answer.
Yeah, it's a good question, Peter, and something for us to keep an eye on for sure. I'll just say, I've been a little concerned that the pendulum was perhaps swinging too far in the other direction, that we were too motivated by sampling in areas where we thought we could make money. And, this is a scientific survey, and that to me should be paramount. But I get your point for sure. Any other commissioner questions or comments? Neil.
Yeah, thanks, John. I guess I'm thinking a little bit beyond the immediate context, because I recognize time is short to sort of figure out what 2024 looks like. But it seems likely we have a longer term issue with the affordability of the survey. And I have my I am a bit of a skeptic about how much additional money we may be able to find out of contracting parties, at least contracting party I represent. I just don't know that that is going to solve our problem. So with that in mind, one of the other things I'm thinking about is some of the arrangements that we have domestically, where there's some kind of collaborative agreement where different parties are making contributions in kind and or financial to cover the costs of certain science activities, including surveys. And that in a number of instances here has involved industry contributing to survey costs, or even something that we call use of fish. And I don't know if this exists in the US, where contingent on support from stakeholders, there is some allocation set aside to support the costs associated with scientific activities like surveys. In other words, you make some allocation gets fished, or it gets, if it's it gets traded, the revenue associated with that is essentially a contribution to the cost of science activities. I just flag those things because I think we probably will want to explore all the potential options for how to find money to support the survey that we decide we want. I don't think it will help us in the coming months, but I do think we need to start sort of exploring more broadly, just figuring out all our options. That's all, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Anyone else? Okay. So if not, as far as where we go from here, I would find it useful to have the Secretariat provide an estimate of the incremental cost of adding some sampling in 4 CD and E. Recognizing it's likely to be expensive, but just so we can get a look at that. Certainly, industry participants in all of Region 4 have voiced interest in having some, making sure that there is sampling in those areas. So I hope that will encourage more bidders this year than perhaps we've seen in the past, and hopefully affordable bids. If stakeholders recognize the value of gaining that data, then hopefully we can count on some partnership there. I think we are going to need some time to explore some additional options about financing for any of these increments, any of the additional options laid out in the slides here and in the paper. So recognizing the time frame here that requests for tenders need to go out by end of December, I guess we'll probably need to have a little bit of intersessional discussion on that to inform what the Secretariat sends out. That said, just asking for those tenders wouldn't necessarily commit us. So we'd have to get a look at what those bids are and whether the financial picture becomes any clearer in January, and then hopefully offer a clear indication to folks by the annual meeting of where we think this is going to go. So that's my quick summary. Let me see if other commissioners want to add or clarify anything.
Thanks for the summary, John. I wonder what time frame you had in mind for that. I think given what we heard from Kyle about the time frame for putting out bids and making decisions, it sounds like we would need to have that discussion sometime in December and probably a follow-up in January.
Yeah, I guess I might look to the Secretariat on that for what's workable. I think Kayla said maybe a week or so to put together an estimate for for CD and E. Whether we need to have an actual conversation versus just reviewing information by email, I'm not sure. Let's see what the Secretariat folks think about that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And just if I could summarize, it sounds as though you're giving green light to put out call for tenders for option 1 and include option 2 and 3 in that call for tenders. Doesn't mean you're endorsing option 2 and 3. We want to see what the tenders are. And then you also want to see a briefing note on what it would cost for some charter areas or charter in 4C, D, and E. And you would make that decision within the next week whether you wanted to add that to the call for tenders. And then on top of that, we have option 4, which is one charter area in 4A and 4B. And it's not clear. Would you like that to go out in the tenders as well, noting you already have the cost estimate available for that?
Yeah, there's no cost to us for putting out the request for proposals, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean it's it's a little bit of a roll of the dice here. I guess we're not gambling much, but I really don't know where the money is going to come from at this point. That said, if we don't proceed with the request for proposals and get bids in and get a sense of what those look like, we would foreclose options. So I, for one, would like to not foreclose those options and think it would be worth proceeding with at least getting the request for bids. Let's see if any other commissioners have different thoughts on that. Okay, if not, then Dave, I guess that would be the intent, is to go out for a call on options 1 through 4, potentially also adding an option for area 4, C, D, and E, and see what we get.
Thank you, Chair. So that's clear. And does that mean that we're ruling out option 5, 6, 7, and 8, or you want to keep those as potential options to consider, particularly noting that options 7 and 8 are things we can add on at a later date. Kayla, what's the CCAT schedule for servicing?
Thank you. We would need to know by February in order to have CCATs prepared in time.
Okay, well, it sounds like we've got some flexibility there to add those in if we want to.
Thanks, Chair.
All right, anything else under this agenda item?
No, I think that's everything, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, well, with that, Chair, we can move on to agenda item 9, which is the Biological and Ecosystem Science Projects Update by Dr. Farnes, and in particular, he's going to be speaking to paper 14. So over to you, Jason.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Good morning, commissioners and stakeholders. I'm happy to present a report on an update on biological and ecosystem science research activities. Just as a reminder, the biological and ecosystem science research has as its main objective to provide data inputs that are useful for reducing uncertainty in stock assessment, and also provide important inputs into the operating model for the MSC process, but also to provide basic and applied understanding of key aspects of the biology and ecology of the Pacific halibut. The stock assessment and MSC also provide, obviously, direction regarding the questions that the biological and ecosystem research needs to answer that are appropriate for management. And as you see on the left-hand side, the IPHC subsidiary bodies, namely the Scientific Review Board, as well as the Research Advisory Board, review and provide advice to the biological ecosystem science program to fine-tune all its activities. So the activities that are contemplated within the biological and system science research are really incorporated into the 5-year program of integrated research and monitoring that spans the period of 2022 to 2026. And these activities are the following. The research areas that are contemplated today are first, migration and population dynamics, reproduction, growth, mortality and survival assessment, and fishing technology. And the objectives of this research areas and the management implications that are shown in this next slide. So if we start with the first research area on the top left of the first column, migration and population dynamics, we see that the main objective of this research area is to improve understanding of migration and population dynamics throughout all life stages of Pacific halibut, larval, juvenile to the adult. The management implications are in stock distribution and regional management. The research area on reproduction has as its main objectives to provide accurate maturity and fecundity estimates. And the management implications are related to our ability to estimate accurately female stock spawning biomass. The research area on growth has as its main objective to improve our understanding of factors that are responsible for historical changes in sizes, age, and the development of tools for monitoring growth and physiological condition in Pacific halibut. The management implications are regarding our ability to estimate biomass. The research area on mortality and survival assessment has as its main objective to improve current estimates of discard mortality rates and to evaluate methods for reducing mortality. The management implications are our ability to improve mortality estimates. And lastly, the research area on fishing technology has its main objectives to development of methods and techniques to reduce depredation and bycatch. And the management implications are, again, mortality estimates. So this next slide, and I understand it's extremely busy and almost impossible to read, but this is just an example of the process that we follow to prioritize research activities. So what you see in different colors are the 5 different research areas from top to bottom, from 1 to 5, migration and population dynamics, reproduction, growth, and so forth. And then you see on the different columns the process that we follow to prioritize this research. For each research area, there are specific research activities with indicated research outcomes. And then relevance for both the stock assessment and the MSC process. What are the specific analysis inputs, and what are the ranks for stock assessment and MSC? Hopefully in the next slide, so you can see a little better how this prioritization takes place. So here we're looking at the prioritization of research activities from the point of view of stock assessment. So on the left column, you see the stock assessment rank, and in white, you see the 3 first biological inputs in terms of rank. And then we see assessment data and collection and processing. And then lastly, regarding fishery yield, again, in ranked order. So this is the process that we've incorporated, for which we incorporated the priorities from stock assessment. And we've done the same thing with management strategy evaluation. So on the left column, you see the rank of the MSC research priorities. So validation of movement estimates first, validation of recruitment variability and distribution second, validation of growth projection third, and then finally the fishery parameterization. And then on the columns on the right, you see what are the specific research activities and outcomes that are related to those priorities for MSC. Just to give you an example of specific research outputs and how they fit into the needs of stock assessment and MSC, if we take, for instance, the first research area, that of migration and population dynamics, the work that we're currently contemplating, which is larval juvenile movement, stock structure, population assignments, adult distribution, relates to stock assessment by providing inputs to reduce uncertainty in spatial dynamics and also to assess changes in assessment structure. If you look towards the right, that's how those research outputs are linked to needs from the MSC process regarding parameterization of movement and recruitment distribution in the operating model. Just to give you another example from another research area, that of reproduction, the sex ratios that we've been monitoring since 2017, and also current work that we are undertaking regarding improving estimates of maturity and fecundity. Those relate to stock assessment by scaling biomass and providing reference point estimates. And then on the right-hand side, again, providing important inputs to MSC through the parameterization of movement and recruitment distribution in the operating model. And then lastly, there's another example from the last two research area. Those are of mortality and survival assessment, as well as the fishing technology research area, specifically regarding discard mortality rates, depredation reduction, response to fishing gear. Those relate to stock assessment through mortality estimates, observed and unobserved. And then those relate on the right-hand side to MSC through stock per activity estimates. So this is just to provide you an indication of how the Secretariat has been prioritizing research and how those priorities and their outcomes are linked with the needs of stock assessment and management strategy evaluation. So let me just provide you with brief updates on each of the 5 research areas. And we're going to start with migration and population dynamics. So the work that we contemplated and we conducted in the previous 5-year research plan, 2017 to 2021, has been now moved into a series of research activities that are contemplated within the current program of integrated research and monitoring. And of the different components of the migration and population dynamics area that are incorporated into that program, I'm just going to highlight 2, the ones that we've been working on this year in 2023. First, the mapping of settlement and nursery areas in order to better understand the connectivity between nursery areas, spawning grounds, and then adult habitat. And we've been doing that by collecting Pacific halibut records of larval presence and absence from a number of different sources. We've also been working with the University of Alaska Fairbanks and analyzing some of the data that was generated in the mid-1990s that was never published. And this was the project that the 2023 IPHC intern was involved in. That was Mr. William Lake, who worked on this project this summer. And also, we've been incorporating, in addition to the presence and absence of Pacific halibut juveniles coastwide, substrate information, the type of substrate, and then we're also in the plans to incorporate depths, the bathymetry layer. So the goal is to provide a map of suitable Pacific halibut habitat. The other project that we've been working on quite extensively over the last few years is the delineation of fine-scale stock structure. So this project is really intended to provide a high resolution of the population structure of Pacific halibut in convention water. So we have samples that were collected from spawning groups collected in the winter from the mid-90s up until 2020 in 5 different areas. If we go from the west of the range until to the east, we have samples collected in the central Aleutian Islands, western Aleutian Islands, Bering Sea, central Gulf of Alaska, and north and south of Haida Gwaii. And we're using a state-of-the-art approach to look at genetic diversity through the use of a technique that's called low-coverage whole genome resequencing. This is a high-resolution technique that allows to screen genomic variation at very high resolution. The objectives that were set out in this project that has been conducted with support from a grant from the North Pacific Research Board is to establish a genetic baseline and to identify potential local and environmental adaptations, and hopefully to provide the tools to provide the genetic basis for key life history traits such as growth, maturity, or migratory behavior. So far, we have sequenced 570 individuals from all those 5 geographic collections over several years. The mean coverage for this individual samples has been 3.5 times. We have identified more than 10 million SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms, that are in autosomal regions. And of this, we have selected a subset of over 4.5 million SNPs that have passed the selection criteria. So these are the pool of SNPs that we're now analyzing to determine whether there's structure within the Pacific halibut population, at least from the samples that we have. And this work is currently in progress. The next research area, that of reproduction, we did a considerable amount of work in the previous 5-year research plan. I think we succeeded in providing important key aspects of the biology, of the reproductive biology of the species, that have now helped us to set the criteria to revise maturity and fecundity. So in 2023, we, within our fisheries independent satellite survey, we collected samples for histology in all 4 biological regions, and we conducted histological analysis in order to revise maturity estimates, not by a macroscopic or visual examination of the gonads, as it's currently being done, but through histological assessment of maturity. In 2022, we were able to obtain a little over 1,000 samples for maturity. They have already been processed for histology. We had a little over 400 samples in biological region 2, a little over 350 samples from biological region 3, 181 samples from biological region 4, and then 51 samples from biological region 4B. So these samples are currently being analyzed, and these are the samples that are going to provide us with a preliminary estimate of maturity based on histological assessment. Now, in 2023, we also collected maturity samples for histology in order to assess any temporal variation in maturity schedules. So in 2023, we only were able to sample biological regions 2 and 3 because of the reduced footprint of the survey in that year. But we were able to collect a little over 1,100 samples for histology, a little over 400 samples from biological region 2 and 700 samples from biological region 3. And these are now being in the process of being processed for histology. So we're going to have in total over 2,000 samples for histology to accurately revise maturity schedules. But also in 2023, we collected samples for fecundity. This is an area of high interest in order to be able to determine how fecundity is related to size and or age. So in 2023, in biologicals regions 2 and 3, we also, in addition to samples for maturity, we also collected samples for fecundity that we will be processing later in 2024. Regarding growth, within the previous 5-year research plan, we also conducted quite a bit of work, and also with funding from a grant from the North Pacific Research Board, and we identified a series of markers that could potentially be useful to monitor growth patterns in Pacific halibut. So within the current program of research and integrated monitoring, we're contemplating work on 2 different areas, and the Secretary is currently conducting discussions regarding the direction in which we want to go. But the 2 main aspects that we're interested in investigating within this period of time is to look for potential environmental influences on growth patterns, as well as potential influences of dietary and environmental conditions. There's no data to report at this moment. The research area mortality and survival assessment was also initiated within the previous 5-year research plan. We conducted work on discard mortality rates in the longline fishery. We have presented some of that work previously, but now we have derived direct estimates of discard mortality rate in the fish that are released in excellent category. This is what you see here in the bottom graph. We estimated that the minimal discard mortality rate in this longline fishery is 4.2%. And we categorized quite accurately the types of injuries and the number of fish in different viability categories that are released. And we're currently relating all those characteristics with other parameters such as time on deck, and eventually to link those with survival. At the same time, we conducted studies on the charter recreational fishery with the objective to first derive, for the first time, experimentally derived DMRs from this fishery, and we determined with the use of accelerometer tags that the minimal discard mortality rate for those fish that are released in excellent viability is 1.35%. And currently we're assessing the a number of variables that were collected also in that study to relate condition, viability, injuries with survival. And lastly, the fishing technology research area. This is a new area that we've integrated in our new or current 5-year program of integrated research and monitoring. And we're conducting work on 2 particular areas. One is on the development of methods for whale avoidance or deterrence in order to reduce whale depredation in the longline fishery, and also to investigate behavioral and physiological responses to fishing gear to reduce bycatch. And I'll only speak to the first one. This is a project that the IPHC has been leading, and we have now conducted a first component of this study, which represented a pilot testing of the 2 different catch protection devices that were selected throughout a process that started in 2021. Sorry. This project has received funding from the Bycatch Reduction Engineering Program, as we mentioned yesterday. And as a result of this effort, we selected 2 catch protection devices for testing. The first one is an underground shuttle that you see here in the pictures. This is a shuttle that the first testing in the absence of whales was took place this summer off the coast of Newport, Oregon. And you can see a picture of the device. This is this aluminum shuttle that has been used for testing a series of operational aspects, as well as catch rates and deployment and retrieval characteristics. Here you see an image on the right-hand side of this device being retrieved after haulback. In the bottom, you see pictures of the device after having entrained catch, and the first results that we obtained were that the catch was actually similar to stakes that did not have the shuttle on. The second device was a shroud, and this is intended to protect a branch line. What we conducted was testing of modified slinky pods, in which one of the ends was completely open and intended to cover the different branch lines. This turned out to be fairly complicated in terms of its use, and the catch rates were very small, so that for the next step in this project, which is now test catch protection devices, once refined and improved in the presence of whales, has received another round of funding from the Bycatch Reduction Engineering Program, and hopefully will be conducted in 2023, but we will not continue work with the shroud. Now, in summary, I just want to highlight the 3 projects that we have received during 2023 that were active during 2023, the 2 bycatch reduction engineering grants, as well as the North Pacific Research Board grant funding work on population genomics. And I'll stop here, and I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Josep. Any questions?
This is Bob. Joseph, I've got a question. This shroud, do you see with the whale predation problems on the outer coast of, or outer continental part of Area 4, do you see this as something that would be functional for IPHC surveys in the future?
Thank you, Commissioner Alverson, for your question. The shrouds turn out to be fairly difficult to handle. I think the conclusion of the logistics of deployment and retrieval and the efficiency was really suboptimal, and it was concluded that it was not worth continuing efforts in trying to develop the shrouds as a potential means to protect catch.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Richard. Yep.
Yeah, could you go to slide 11? So really interested in this area because, as stated earlier, the two things that really are affecting our stocks are recruitment and growth of the halibut species for the biomass in the near future. And we got some information, obviously, on the recruitment Ian presented us. So I'm interested in this growth, and it seems like all your research is in the area, mostly laboratory types of work. I'm curious to see if you, looking at the ecological factors, in the environment, the changing ecological systems, the predator-prey relationships, food web component changes. Those are kind of, in my involvement in other fishery management systems, been coming up a lot, that the relationships in the ecosystem may be a serious reason why growth of other species are being impacted. So I think getting a better handle of what these relationships are, and if we're able to predict them in the future, would give us a better handle on where the stock is going as far as this one element of growth. So do you have any comments on that, or are you looking at expanding your research? This is a lot of research. I mean, doing a great job. So, but like temperature and density, all of these are really important factors. But a major factor is the ecological food web and its impact on the halibut growth.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Yamada, and thank you for your comments. Yes, this is an area where, as I mentioned before, we're actively discussing future avenues because this is a really important area. There's been more recent collaboration between the Secretariat and Alaska Pacific University in looking at spatial changes in size and age within IPHC Regulatory Area 3A. So this is there's actually a publication now that is currently in review. And we're engaged in discussions right now as to what is the design of future research in this area, and linking particularly precisely what you just mentioned, linking environment with changes in growth, linking potential prey influences. I think the graph that Dr. Stewart showed yesterday regarding historical changes in size and age. When one looks at average growth of females at different ages, there's actually promising data and good justification for continuing our work on growth. You see those small or younger year classes actually changing the average weight and age relative to what we had been seeing over the last 10 or 15 years. So there's dynamic changes in growth and population that definitely deserve a future study. So we're actively designing a research plan to pursue work on growth.
Thank you for that. Other questions?
Hi, John. It's Peter.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that, Josep. That was excellent, Dr. Planas. On the discard mortality, I know that so you did in testing in laboratories on fish in good condition, and now you're looking more into the other injury. Is the end result the hope to get a percentage discard mortality rate that's reflective of the style of fishing, or so you could apply it better apply it to fisheries caught in various fisheries?
Thank you.
Fisheries, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner LeGreaves. I think you're right on the point. One of the important things that resulted from this work first was the direct estimation of DMRs that has been done for both types of fisheries, longline and charter recreational fishery. But what the current work that we're doing now, evaluating all the parameters that were measured on those fish that were captured under different conditions, handled under different conditions, and then released, for which we know the survivability, at least for the fish that are under excellent category, is to be able to identify good predictors of survivability. So this is work in progress, and at least for the longline fishery, what we saw was that obviously most fish, their injury profile is quite characteristic of the type of release method. So that was very well described, and the same sort of very similar approach was taken to analyze handling practices from the recreational fishery, different types of gear. In fact, that study contemplated the use of two different hooks, 12-aught and 16-aught. But also water temperature, ambient temperature, the temperature difference, whether that had any effect. So those parameters are actually, or variables are now being investigated to see if there are some that are better predictors of survivability.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think you're on the right track. In terms of fishing technology, and maybe it's just me having to do some research, but has the IPHC, and to your knowledge, ever done any research on like trawl extruders or anything like that to increase the survivability of halibut through bycatch or indirect catch? Yeah, just curious if there are any papers. I assume I could Google it, but I was just curious if you're aware of any good papers on that.
There was probably one of the first DMRs that were estimated directly through the use of accelerometer tags was on fish that were discarded from the trawl fishery, and that was a paper that I can provide the reference for. It was a paper that was published in, if my memory is correct, in 2019. And after that, what we actually participated are in studies that are led by Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission in evaluating the use of artificial lights to reduce bycatch in the troll fishery. And the IPHC Secretariat participated in some of those studies, providing also information on the stress responses of fish that were caught in nets. The result of that study was that the presence of LED lights reduced the number of Pacific halibut that were trapped by the trawls. So there's a response to light that we don't fully understand, but that could be potentially used to reduce Pacific halibut bycatch. So regarding discard in that fishery, that's the extent of the work that I'm aware of at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll definitely look those up. Thanks again for your presentation, Dr. Planis, and we'll see you soon.
Any other questions before we go to public comment? Dave, do we have anybody who wanted to make a comment on this?
Yeah, I'm just checking. Doesn't look like there's anything. No check.
Okay, if not, we can move on to regulations.
Thank you. So we will pass to Dr. Hutchinson, who's going to walk you through agenda item 10, and in particular, paper 15, and the associated regulatory proposals. So to you, Basha.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. I'll now present IPHC fishery regulations proposals for the 2023-2024 process. In terms of regulatory process, IPHC has an IPHC fishery regulations portal available on our website, which has been designed to facilitate submission of regulatory proposals. As a reminder, the deadline for regulatory proposals is 30 days prior to each opening of the session, of the IPHC session. And for the IM, that was 31st of October. And for the IM100, the deadline for regulatory proposals will be 23rd of December 2023. As of today, we have 3 IPHC fishery regulations proposals from the Secretariat. First 2 are standard proposals. The proposal A1 is to provide clear documentation of mortality and fishery limits within the IPHC fishery regulations. And as a reminder, this proposal offers a framework for the mortality and fishery limits. And this framework is used to incorporate fish mortality and fishery limits into the regulations based on the decision of the Commission at the annual meeting. Proposal A2 is related to commercial fishing periods and specifies periods for the directed commercial Pacific halibut fisheries within the IPHC fishery regulations. Again, this proposal is a framework, and the decision about the specific dates is made by the commissioners at the annual meeting. In terms of proposal A3, this is proposal related to update and alignment of the log requirements, and have a little bit more details provided here. This proposal combines 6 components for Commission's consideration. These components can be adopted individually, and through that, it offers a flexibility to adopt either specific components or the full set based on the Commission's design. Component 1, in this component, the Secretariat proposes that U.S. logs not previously collected by the Commission must be submitted to the Commission within 30 days after the season closes. This will offer the Secretariat a little bit more structured compilation of the logbook data after the season closes. Component 2, the IPHC Secretariat in this component proposes consistent requirements with respect to reporting fishing location and daily activity. This proposed change will ensure consistency of the submitted data, rendering it more usable for IPHC products. Component 3 revises the list of eligible logbooks for United States vessels fishing for Pacific halibut, removing some legacy provisions that were identified. This component will also align better the names of the logbooks with NOAA use terms in our regulations, and it reorganizes this paragraph on logs for easier referencing. Component 4 highlights the importance of writing in the logs, and it clarifies that it has to be clear and legible for data entry. Component 5 paves the way for the IPHC to accept electronic logbooks approved by NOAA fisheries. This component will be conditional on cooperation between the IPHC and the vendor that is currently considered by NOAA fisheries. And it's conditional on the integration of this logbook into the IPHC process, in particular with respect to data verification and quality control by Commission's representatives that are present at the time of offload. These discussions are still ongoing, and the feasibility of this update will be provided to the Commission before the annual meeting. Component 6 is very similar to Component 5 and offers the IPHC the option to approve electronic equivalents of the IPHC logbook. This approval is, again, conditional on integration of electronic reporting with the IPHC data verification process by Commission's representatives in staff reports. This proposal, except Component 4, is directly affecting commercial Pacific halibut fishery in United States regulatory areas. However, I will note that all sectors stand and all regions stands to benefit from better informed IPHC products, for example, products such as stock assessment. In terms of IPHC fishery regulation proposals from contracting parties, to date we have not received any, but I will note we do expect for the annual meeting a proposal from NOAA Fisheries related to charter management measures. This proposal is submitted annually, but usually at a later date. I will also note that if there are any questions related to this proposal at this time, we should have Kurt Iverson, NOAA policy advisor, who is available to provide additional comments on the content of this proposal that again has not been submitted yet, but is expected. To date, we have not received any regulations proposals from stakeholders. However, I will note that we have 2 stakeholder comments that have been compiled in the information paper 1. One of these proposals relates to concerns regarding mortality, and the second aligns with the comments that we have already seen this morning. As a reminder to all the stakeholders, comments may be submitted via online IPHC stakeholder comment form, and these proposals are compiled into the information paper that is available to the Commission ahead of each session, and there will be one compiled for the upcoming annual meeting. With that, I can take any questions related to IPHC regulatory process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Basha. Any questions on this? I'll just note that the NOAA Fisheries regulatory proposal that Basha mentioned typically comes after the December North Pacific Fishery Management Council meeting, when the council acts on the Charter Fishery Committee recommendations. Neil, go ahead.
I'm going to confess to a faulty memory here. I wondered if the Secretariat could give us an update on how the transition of management responsibilities in 2A is going. If I remember, it was sort of making good progress, but not all the way done. Are we now sort of done and dusted with that?
Thank you for this question. The transition went very smoothly. It was the first year with the new management that has been implemented through NOAA Fisheries. We, Secretary, offer support in terms of providing any data and experience we had in that area. But the whole process, including setting the dates, openers, and vessel limits, that has been fully within the NOAA area of responsibility now. We have provided additional details about this transition and comments on that in the Secretariat's report, that is paper 04. And we will be providing full presentation summarizing this process for the annual meeting as well.
Great, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm here, John.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, John. More of a comment than a question, and it's just in regards to writing in the logbook being legible, I guess. Writing in a logbook in a Gale is not ideal and not optimal, and the penmanship is, sometimes not that great. But I just hope that there is some understanding that, some of these logbooks are not being done in perfect conditions. So in Canada, we're required to do our logbooks the day of. And so, being that that's the rule, and people have been penalized for not doing that, I just hope there's some understanding of that as well. So more of a comment. Thanks, Bessa.
Okay, Dave, do we have any public commenters here?
Thanks, Chair. Not on this one, but one did come in for the previous presentation, if you wanted to take that at this point.
Sure, go ahead.
Right. Okay. Just have that presentation brought up, please. Okay, while that's being brought up, I can see it already. So this is a question for Dr. Planis from Peggy Parker on agenda item 9. It says, we appreciate the priorities as you described regarding migration, so slides 8 and 9. Can you tell us when the map of nurseries and juvenile migration may be completed? And she has a second question on slide 12, where DMRs looked at for pot gear in the directed fisheries. So I'm not exactly sure. Maybe Peggy, if you're online, we can give you the mic and you can articulate that second part of your question. Not hearing you, Peggy. Can you just try and reactivate the microphone? See, they've given you access, Peggy. You just try to reactivate your microphone. Okay, don't seem to be having any luck. Joseph, did you want to respond to the first part of that question?
Sure. Yes. Thanks, Dr. Wilson. Thank you, Peggy, for your question. Regarding the first one, on the map of nurseries and juvenile migration, this is work in progress. I'm a little hesitant to provide a date for completion for this project, particularly because the research biologist who was responsible for the project recently retired from the IPHC after many years of service. Ms. Lori Sadoris, and we had as I mentioned, the IPHC intern this year work on this particular project. We're definitely going to try to make progress within the next year or so, but as I said, I'm a little hesitant to provide a definite date right now. We have a number of research activities that fully task our current staff in the research biological and system research branch, and we'll need to revise a little bit our schedules and task distributions in order to be able to complete this project. I would hope that within next 12 months we will be able to make progress, but again, I'm a little hesitant to provide a specific date.
Thanks, Dr. Planas. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was my answer to the first question that you had.
Yes, and the second, that's very helpful. Thanks. And then the second question on pot gear.
The second question, to my knowledge, that has not been looked at yet, and there's I personally do not have any information regarding potential DMRs for pot gear for Pacific Halibut.
Yep, just curious. It doesn't look like there would be much, but
No, not to our knowledge.
yeah, okay, great. And thanks for taking my question out of order. I appreciate that to the staff and to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. That's all the questions we have.
Okay, very good. Well, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but we are scheduled for a 15-minute break. So let's go ahead and take that.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Chair. It looks like we have everybody back online. I think Richard's camera is off, but he's showing online.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and proceed with agenda item 11.
Thanks, Chair. So agenda item 11, or 11.1 in particular, is just a quick update on the FY 2023 budget. So if we could have paper 16, Rev 1, brought up to the screen, please. Bear with us for a moment or too long. Okay, so there's no presentation associated with this. It's just a draft update on the financial statement for FY 2023. Noting that, of course, that the accounts are still being finalized and we're going through our annual auditing process with our auditors, Clark Nuber. A couple of points I wanted to highlight, particularly as we go through this transition from being compliant with OCBOA system of accounting to being fully GAAP compliant, is that a couple of things are going to change in the way you see our financial statements being presented. And so what's contained in the various appendices are designed to just give you a bit of a heads up of our gradual transition. And for the Finance and Administration Committee meeting in January, you're going to see a series of tables that look different to what you've seen previously. And there are a couple of reasons for that. And obviously the main reason is as we transition from OCBOA to being GAAP compliant, we've implemented a number of new accounting standards, and they are detailed in these couple of dot points on the cover paper of 16 Rev 1. As part of that, we will be reporting leases and assets liabilities on the balance sheet instead of rent and lease expenses on the income statement. And so you're going to see that as a bit of a transition. We're also changing the way we have our period cutoffs for matching income and grant expenses in particular. As a bit of an example, historically, the Commission has reported our grant funds as revenue when the cash was received in the bank account. However, for FY 2023, that grant revenue has been accrued when the criteria was met associated with the grant, which is when costs were covered under the grant agreement, were actually expended. So, for example, in 2023, we received grant funds through the Alaska Cost Recovery Program to cover expenses in FY 2021 and FY 2022. So in the appendices, you'll see that we have the total amounts that were received. Sorry, I grabbed the wrong mouse there. For the grant income totaling $1.491 million for Alaska Cost Recovery, so Fund 35. What you're going to see in the financial documents that will be presented at the FAC is all of those funds being recorded as a prior period adjustment for FY 2021 and FY 2022. That number is particularly high this year because of the transition in the NOAA grant scheme, which allowed us to draw down 2 fiscal years of cost recovery instead of the standard 1. And so what that means when you look at this transition from what you see in front of you now versus what you're going to see at the FAC is that the $1.491 million essentially will be moved into the reserve fund as it's paying for costs that have already been incurred by the Commission in FY 2021 and FY 2022. The other element I wanted to highlight here is the balance in the reserve fund for the FIS, so Fund 40. We started the year with a balance of positive $200,000 US, and we're ending the fiscal year with a negative balance of $106,000. Certainly a lot better than what we were anticipating mid-FIS season, but it's also something just to keep in mind that we're already starting the 2024 FIS season with a negative balance of $106,000. The remaining elements contained within the paper, as I said, are very much draft at this point in time. They are the standard balance sheet, income statement, budget to actuals, as well as the income statement by fund. And I would just recommend that you use these as a reference document when we make the transition for the Finance and Administration Committee in January with the new tables that are going to be presented. And so the only other point I would make is in terms of the overall balance sheet, which is Appendix 1 on the screen, we have a total liabilities and total equity of just over $6 million. And noting about half of that is liabilities means that our total fund balance or equity balance at the end of FY 2023 is $3.3 million. And so effectively, that's what we're carrying into the new fiscal year. And so all we're asking the Commission to do is simply note this paper at this point in time. It is in draft format. We are making a number of additional modifications as some final charges are coming in for FY 2023, particularly related to the FIS. We will finish up the audit very shortly, and that'll be presented to you in the same format as it's been presented in previous years, meaning that we'll have the auditors make the presentation of the statement audit to you, and then the Finance and Administration Committee will be looking for your endorsement. And with that, I'll close. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you for explaining the changes there and all the improvements. That's good to see. Let's see if there are any questions. Neil.
I just want to make sure I understood, Dave, part of what you described about the way that grants would be treated. So even if the Secretariat received the money in fiscal year 2023, but it covers expenses associated with the previous year, we will end up reporting it as revenue in a prior year. Does that mean we're sort of like revisiting prior year's statements? What will that mean for us practically in terms of sort of like the documents we have to generate and approve each year? Are we going back to previous year's statements with sort of updates to them, or what does that mean?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And through the chair, what that means is that if we use FY 2024 as an example, we have the total income expected and total expenses expected for the Fort Sampling program, the Alaska Cost Recovery program. We need to carry sufficient reserves to expend in FY 2024. And so that come 1 October 2024, which is FY 2025, when we make the drawdown, those funds will be credited back to fiscal year 2024. And so as we go through this transition, it's a little bit clunky this year because we have 2 prior year adjustments that are being received in FY 2023 and being credited back through the auditors, through the auditing report. But moving forward, it's going to be it won't be too bad. It'll be quite clean because we're only talking about October of each fiscal year receiving the funds as a lump sum from NOAA, and then as part of the closeout process and annual auditing process, those funds will be credited to that prior fiscal year. Does that answer your question?
I'm sure it does. It's more just a matter of processing the answer on my end, but I appreciate the walkthrough. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else with questions or comments? I don't think so, Dave.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Moving on to agenda item 12, we have 2 agenda items. One, which is the preparation for the 100th, and then we have the additional agenda item that you added, Chair, specifically looking at the national reporting templates. And so I might pass, if that's okay, I might pass to Andrea to speak to the agenda item 12.1 regarding the preparation of the 100th. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Yes, please do.
Thank you, Commissioner. So a big thank you to the Planning Committee that consists of DFO Representative Felicia Cole, State Department Representative Dimitri Varmes, Dr. Wilson, and Commissioner Yamada. We have received the contracting parties' additional contributions to make our centenary celebration extra special this year. And we have made great progress and are expecting an amazing IM100 with special aspects that highlight and celebrate the 100 years. I don't want to give too much away, but we are in the final stages of signing with a fantastic, culturally significant band that will provide amazing entertainment during the reception. And we are securing the great honor of the first chief of the native village of El Kutuna, which is in the municipality of Anchorage, who will be working with the Dena'ina tribal for a historical perspective of the land of the people of Anchorage for our opening recognition. So things are going smoothly, and I'm excited for everyone to enjoy the centenary celebrations. Anyone have any questions?
Okay, well, that's thanks for dangling that with a little mystery. Very good. We look forward to the big event. Anything else in preparation for the annual meeting, Dave?
No, I guess just a reminder regarding the deadlines for all papers, including the fishery regulations, is the 23rd of December. Noting that's a Saturday, we'd ask that if there are any regulatory proposals coming in, that they get submitted ideally on the 22nd of December or earlier. But other than that, just the team, Andrea and the team, are certainly keeping everybody well informed of preparations for the annual meeting.
Okay, very good.
John, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I wondered if the committee has discussed, or the contracting parties have sort of discussed the idea of somebody sort of providing remarks on behalf of each party. I don't know if we want to use the word dignitary, but somebody. Where are we at on that front?
Thank you for the question. Yes, both our representatives from DFO and the State Department are handling any kind of dignitary and identifying those people, and then we are working for a historical perspective and are also securing an MC for the event as well.
Super. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Dave, nothing else for the annual meeting?
No, that's all we have, Chair. For the next agenda item 12.2, there is an information paper 03 that Dr. Hutchinson has prepared. And so maybe I'll pass to Dr. Hutchinson just to highlight that paper and then open it up for discussion as you see fit.
Okay,
Yes,
very
thank
good.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Perlin. So the Commission expressed an intention to update the format of the national reports, and this has been conveyed to us through also discussions with policy advisors. As a response to that, we prepared a template that is really designed to streamline the development of these reports. I will, however, note that at the same time, the proposed template offers flexibility to adjust it as needed. And it should be really seen as a step towards more standardized reporting, but edits can be made as this is, as I mentioned, flexible, a template, and this should be available to help each contracting party to get to this process of more standardized reporting with the flexibility necessary given the timelines related to the upcoming annual meeting. So this template has been provided in an editable format to policy advisors from both contracting parties, but can be adjusted as needed based on any discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Basha. So recall that at last year's annual meeting, the commission decided to confirm at the interim meeting what topics each party would like to see addressed in the other party's contracting reports for 2024. And I think this was just a recognition that the reports maybe had been padded with more information than was really needed. That's not intended as a criticism, but I guess my observation was that we all sort of felt that we could be a little bit more targeted in what we include in the contracting party reports and relieve staff from compiling unnecessary information and focus the reports more on items of greatest interest. I understand that last summer, Gwyn and Kurt began discussions about standardizing and streamlining the reports a bit. We didn't really get to this in any substance at the September work meeting agenda, but there was the decision for IPHC staff to provide this template that Bosch has just described. And my understanding is advisors just received a draft on Tuesday of this week, so probably haven't had a lot of opportunity to reflect on it. But as Basha indicated, the intent would be to use the template as a general guide, not to be inflexible in what the contents are. But I think the idea is not wholesale revisions, but to make some efforts at streamlining this year for this year's contracting party reports. So I know U.S. advisors intend to try to work on that. I trust Canadian advisors do as well. And I guess this is just an opportunity for commissioners, if we have any specific requests for our advisors as to particular items of interest that each contracting party should cover in its report. Now would be the opportunity to flag anything like that.
Hi, John. It's Peter.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. It's my understanding that we do need an enforcement report. I assume it would still be contained, but we need that for our MSC certificate. And so I just want to highlight that.
Okay. Other comments or suggestions? All right. Well, maybe we'll leave it to our Crackerjack advisors here to work on this going forward. And I guess I'd encourage maybe a little bit of informal dialogue between the U.S. and Canadian advisors on this, so there's parity in the nature of the reports. But again, we're aiming for it to be informative and streamlined to the extent we can. All right. I think that covers it. Is there anything else under this other business agenda item?
From us, Chair.
Okay. Dave, do you want to describe what you have in mind for report drafting?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So literally 2 seconds ago, I just sent all 6 commissioners the current draft report, which is up to date as of this last agenda item. There are 79 paragraphs. About half of those are perfunctory in nature, and the Commission simply needs to decide if you would like to adjourn for an hour or so to review that report and then reconvene to adopt in session, or whether you would like to do that via correspondence over the course of the afternoon or early next week. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Paul, I don't know if you have any strong thoughts on that. I guess my feeling is doing it via correspondence is probably fine, but what do you think?
I was wondering if we had enough time today, John, to see if we can cross it off and deal with it.
That's fine. Do you want to suggest a time to reconvene?
It's now 11. About 1 o'clock.
Okay.
So, Chair, if it is possible between now and when you reconvene, if you and your delegations do have an opportunity to review and provide edits and track changes, we'll have the advantage of then being able to combine those track changes from the 2 contracting parties to put up on the screen and share. It might just expedite that process. If not, that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So, Dave, Paul here. I don't see it in my inbox. I don't know if Peter or Neil has it, but I don't see it yet.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a bit to get through filters, so.
I'm sure it's caught in the DFO ether.
I'm free of that ether, so I have it.
So it's on its way, Paul.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much. So we'll be back at 2 o'clock, you said, or 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Perfect. Thank you.
Pacific time. Yep. All right. Thank you all.
Hey, John. I don't see Richard, but we have all three Canadians, yourself and Bob. While we're just waiting for Richard, I'll just point out that we received the US edits. They have been incorporated into the draft in track changes, and so we'll be able to review those on screen. Didn't transfer across the comments, but I figured you'd speak to each of those seeking clarification. So how would you like to proceed, Chair? Noting we still don't have Richard at this point.
Yeah, let me just shoot him a text message, but I think we can probably start in just a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, I think Richard will be joining us, but we can go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. So the usual process of adoption is that we'll go paragraph by paragraph, highlighting any current edits that are shown in track changes, and then just move our way sequentially through the report before we adopt it. Just a reminder that if you do have edits, if you could pose specific text, that would certainly help the scribe who's going to type it in real time for us. So section 1, opening of the session. So paragraph 1, we've just added in the numbers of those who are participating, 21 members, including 6 commissioners and 15 credentialed advisors, and 77 online observers. So I'm just going to move relatively quickly through these sections that are usually perfunctory in nature. Section 2, paragraph 2.
Hey, Dave, on that first section, I'll just note that we had some people listed as observers who actually were not observing, sorry, credentialed advisors. So that may revise the number down here.
Oh, thank you for that. So what we have done is just copied and pasted those on the credentials. Happy to remove them though if they didn't participate, if you prefer. Okay, so now I'll just start calling out the paragraph numbers and we can scroll through. Paragraph 2. Paragraph 3. Paragraph 4. Paragraph 5. Paragraph 6. Paragraph 7, first agreement. Paragraph 8. Paragraph 9. The report of the Research Advisory Board, so we'll start to slow down a little bit. Paragraph 10.
Do you want?
Yeah. Is that a question, comment?
Yeah, hi. Tom here. Can we go back to 7? Yeah, thanks, Dave. So, Dave, how are we going through this? We had some changes proposed on this, and we just shared those with you, and then John and you other U.S. commissioners do not have them. How are we doing this? Just to confirm.
So if US had sent their edits in, and so I actually made the edits already on screen for any that actually are there, but I haven't received the Canadian edits. So at this point, given we're going through paragraph by paragraph, it will be easier if you just speak directly to them and we make them on screen.
So we sent it to you.
Yeah, I sent it about 10 minutes ago. I don't know if it's just taking a little bit of time, but I sent them directly to you, Dave.
I see them now. If you'd like me to transcribe them in, I certainly can, but we need to go offline for a short moment. Alternatively, if you could speak to them.
Whatever you think is the most efficient.
Yeah, Dave, if it would be more efficient for us to just stand down for 10 or 15 minutes while you do that.
Let's do that. So I'll just have a quick scan. Yeah, I don't think that'll take me more than 15 minutes.
Okay, and Dave, you said that you've already incorporated the US ones?
In this version that's on screen now, yes.
And we'll recognize the changes?
Yes.
Okay, so there haven't been any up till 7. Okay. Yeah, so if you go off screen and incorporate ours, that would be, I think, the most efficient way to go. Thanks.
Okay, let's come back in 15. Thank you. Everybody, Chair, I'll pass back to you to start.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So all of the text edits have now been incorporated for both contracting parties. I haven't dropped in the comments. So one way we could move forward now is to simply hit next and find the next paragraph with edits. And if we skip over a paragraph, we can always come back, but that might expedite things as well. So starting from paragraph 1, if we skip over those numbers, so if you just hit find next change. Okay, so the first edits are associated with paragraph 7. I'll pause there. And these are from Canada.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So, John, we just made some, I think, minor changes to this. We crossed out agreed and said noted, and said the commission would continue discussion to see common ground.
And Paul, what's the and at the end there?
Oh, it goes with the commission recommended.
I guess I don't follow that since the italicized paragraph there is not a recommendation from this meeting, but it's one carried forward from that performance review.
That's correct.
Well, the implication there to me with the and is that this was something that the commission reiterated at this meeting, and that's not correct.
Yeah, so if you have a problem with that, we can take that out. I think the important part is the commission would continue discussing the seat column.
So you're suggesting just a period after common ground?
Correct.
Okay, I think that would be fine. Yep,
Okay.
that looks right.
Okay, next. Canada just asked for a timeline, so by IM100, paragraph 12.
Okay.
And then we have a new paragraph to follow, paragraph 14, so 14 bis on screen by Canada. I'll skip over minor grammaticals.
Hang on just a sec, Dave. On that one we were just looking at, I was trying to digest it without looking back at that section. I wonder, Paul, if you can just explain what you were getting at there.
Yeah, we just thought that this would be a good way to provide some more connectivity. For us, commissioners, basically, John.
Sorry, Paul, your audio is really pretty poor. I wonder if you could get closer to your microphone.
We thought that this would be a good way to provide some more clarity about what the importance and likely effects of stock assessment are on each of the research topics that we heard from Joseph today.
I see. Okay.
Okay, are you ready to move on?
Yes, thanks.
The next edition is paragraph 21 bis from Canada.
So, Dave, I think we had one in 15.
There was a question there, I think. Yes.
So it was just a question about the term artificial intelligence, which in other contexts I've seen artificial intelligence distinguished from machine learning, and I wonder if this should include leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Thank you for this question. I believe artificial intelligence is the most encompassing term that is used. Machine learning is usually considered a kind of subset that is that can be considered part of the AI broader term.
Okay, fair enough.
So noting there are some comments that I didn't have time to transfer across, I might actually just go paragraph by paragraph quickly. So if there is a comment in your notes that you'd like to pause on and ask that question of the other contracting party, just stop me. So paragraphs 16 and 17 and 18. Paragraph 19, 20, and 21. Then we have a 21 bis, a new paragraph from Canada. I'll pass to Canada.
Yeah, thanks, David. So, John, I don't think we really discussed this during the meeting, but we thought we would add it since we're still at the meeting, if that makes sense. Thought this would be a good addition to provide some clarity around the sampling stations. And so we phrased it as the commission requested that moving forward, a map similar to Figure 2, but of stations that were realized during the sampling season be presented and included in the meeting report. Ineffective stations be identified separately from those sampled with a third color. It's just to provide some more clarity, John.
I see. So just clarity regarding stations that were not sampled, calling those out.
Excuse me.
We didn't think it would be controversial, but if you have an issue with it.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a good clarification.
Paragraph 22 and 23. I can't remember. I think this might have been a US comment. Sorry.
It was, and this was just intended to be a clarification. What the bidding is all about, well, it's bidding for fish caught in the FIS, and then noting that this has provided the opportunity to increase revenues and offset, and it probably should say and partially offset the cost of the FIS.
Paragraph 24. And for the space-time modeling section, paragraph 25, 26, 27. Paragraph 28. Then in 29, we have a number of edits from both contracting parties. And so 29B, I think that's, just looking for the team as well, just to confirm the numbers. So the paper indicates 2 to 4. Paul or Neil or Peter, can I just query the 3?
Sorry, I thought it had read a 3%, but I could be, yeah, I must have misread something.
Okay. Paragraph D, there was the US edits.
Yeah, so the first was just a typo, should have been for CDE. And then the latter clause was just to clarify something that came out of dialogue with Secretariat staff about the importance of doing the FIST periodically along the shelf edge.
Yeah, that's okay.
Paragraph, subparagraph E is a new paragraph from the US.
I don't think that was ours.
Yes, I think that was the Canadian one. I've just labeled it. No, that's right. It's labeled Canada. So biological region 2, subparagraph E.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we were reading a little bit further down in 33 about risks where we noted biological region 3. And so we didn't think the status of biological region 2 was necessarily a risk, but it was another sort of feature of the summary that seemed relevant. So we put it up further with the same, basically the same sort of structure of the sentence, just with adjustments.
Notes here.
So near 33C.
I think that looks fine.
Okay. Subparagraph F. Just looking for the team for 11%.
So perhaps just a clarification on F, the stable from 22 to 23 was added to delineate between the fact that although this year's results are lower, it's not indicating a decline in spawning biomass from 22 to 23. It's just that this year's estimate is lower than last year's.
I think that might need a bit of explanation then in the text here. Because the way when we read it, we were sort of, I think our concern was that saying it was smaller than last year's stock assessment, but stable could be confusing for a reader. Are there a few words we could add to sort of differentiate between the assessment versus the spawning biomass there?
This assessment estimates it to be stable. But this assessment estimates it to be stable from 2022 to 2023. Help? Yeah, even the new sentence.
Assessment estimates it to
Be stable from 2022 to 2023.
doesn't really make sense to me. I think the question will come up like, how can it be estimated at 11% smaller in the stock assessment, but stable from 1 year to the next?
The 11%, correct?
So one way to revise it would be to spin this, to put the second part first and say, this year's stock assessment estimates a stable trend from 2022 to 2023, semicolon. However, the coastwide spawning biomass is estimated to be 11% smaller than it was in last year's stock assessment.
I guess it makes, you know, I've got a hard time understanding how it's 11% smaller, it's not considered stable.
So the stock assessment doesn't just add a year to the end of the time series, it actually reestimates the entire time series. And in this case, the comparison is made to last year's estimate. That's where the 11% comes from. So perhaps to try another way to word it, but the coastwide spawning biomass, the scale of the coastwide spawning biomass is estimated to be 11% lower than in last year's stock assessment.
Ian, do you think that, I'm just trying to think about what the kind of important message, like, I think having both pieces still seems like a bit confusing. So do you think that it would be accurate, or is what we most want to capture that fact that the scale of coastwide spawning biomass is estimated to be 11% smaller than last year's assessment? Like, could we just say that?
Actually, I think the first part is the key piece, is that the trend is stable. And I think perhaps the change in scale from last year is just a detail that can be in the documents. I don't think the 11% is a key result.
So just to discuss this a bit more, why is 11% less not the important part in your view?
Because this year we have new and better information. So our best scientific estimate of the stock is that the trend is stable from 2022 to 2023. It is certainly useful to note that this year's estimate is lower than last year's, but last year's is only relevant as context, not as the primary result from this year.
So Ian, is it sort of the difference, like we re-estimated the whole time series, and the whole time series did this by 11% versus what?
Sorry.
No. Sorry, go ahead.
Just the end of the time series, just 2023 was the point that was down 11%. The rest of the time series is estimated to be very similar. The drop this year is just at the very end of the time series, and that was in response to the reduced CPUE from the fishery, both in 2022 and in 2023. I apologize. I was trying to capture several slides worth of background from the presentation in a single bullet, which was ambitious, I think.
For sure. I think from like the reader's perspective, I mean, my sense would be they're going to be most interested in the change from last year to this year. But please, other commissioners, chime in if you see it differently.
Well, I take Ian's point that from his standpoint, it's more if I heard him correctly, it's kind of more meaningful that the trends are stable.
Perhaps one solution would be to just separate this into two sub-bullets. One would be the first sentence here, and then the second would be, as described in the presentation, the estimate of 2023 spawning biomass was 11% smaller in this year's stock assessment than it was in last year's stock assessment. And that could be a separate sub-bullet. That way the two concepts are clearly identified as different topics with different contributing factors.
I can agree to that. I think it's probably going to be different people are going to have different views of what's the important part. Stable and down 11%. So I think depending on who's reading this may have different interpretations, but I think that's factual.
Ian, can I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
Yeah, just so, is this what it's also saying is that between 2021 and 2022 it was not stable, like it had moved down at that point? Like you were saying it was stable all till that point. At some point we lost the fish, right? I'm trying to understand it. I'm sorry if I'm a fisherman.
So without going back to the presentation, if you do want to go back and look, the slides 28 and 29 in the presentation illustrated the effect of adding the commercial logbook information. On slide 28, comparing to previous stock assessments, this year's results are quite close up through 2020. And then starting with 2021, 22, and 23, this year's result is slightly lower. So I wouldn't say we lost the fish. I would say we now estimate that the stock was actually a little bit lower in the last couple of years than we had estimated in previous years.
Okay. So it wasn't stable from 20, or sorry, it was, can you describe it as stable between 2020 and 2022 then? That's what I understand what's happening. I just don't know, how to, anyway.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. We now estimate that the stock was declining slightly over that time period.
Okay, so it was not stable at that point. Okay,
that's correct.
Okay,
but does appear to be now at the end of the time series, given the maturation of the 2012 year class.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
Okay, so it looks like F is okay, and G, I think we just need slight more edit there from after spawning biomass, just to delete the words is estimated to be. Replaced with was. Okay, subparagraph I. Again,
so in H, actually, one of our reviewers had the sort of an eagle eye on it that it wasn't clear whether the intent there was to say they each are smaller or combined they both are smaller.
The intent was that each are smaller, just emphasizing the fact that although they are better than we've seen in a few years, neither is as large as that 2005 year class. So I think each would be a fine edit there instead of both.
Okay, so
okay, Canada, subparagraph I.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. This is something that we tried to capture that Ian said about what were the important factors as far as the main drivers of stock abundance. And so, Ian, if we've not captured your words appropriately, then you should weigh in.
Yeah, would it be more appropriate to say stock biomass than abundance?
Could be both or either. Weighted age certainly will influence biomass only. So abundance and biomass or just biomass would be fine. But yeah, I think that captures the comments.
That's fine. Okay.
Okay, paragraph 30. Now, for both paragraph 31 and 32, we're proposing to move those down to become paragraphs 38 bis and ter, but there are some edits in there as well. So first in 31B.
Yeah, that was ours, and just a clarification from what we thought we heard.
I think we could drop in excess and substitute at or above. That would be a fine change.
Okay.
Okay. And then paragraph 32E from Canada.
Yep.
It's all good. Okay.
What's the rationale for that new paragraph?
Is this your edit?
Yeah, yeah, John. It was to try to capture the when we're trying to target an F43, we're actually between. I don't have the numbers, but it could fall anywhere between F22 and F58 or something like that.
Yeah, there's a range, but there's nothing unique about F43. That's true with any.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
So
I guess
the clarification during the discussion was that because we set a TCY, there's uncertainty in the level of fishing intensity that will correspond to. And I think that's a good clarification point. So it could just be something more general.
So Ian, can you suggest something there?
Perhaps something like the commission noted that because it sets TCEYs, the corresponding level of fishing intensity, and you could even have parenthetically, e.g. F43, comes with a high degree of uncertainty.
So noting that this is a commission noting, would you like it as a new paragraph?
So Ian, the point there is that any corresponding fishing mortality level comes with a high degree of uncertainty. Is that right?
That's correct. And I do think it actually should be a separate paragraph because it is a risk that is included in the decision table. That range is reported at the top of the decision table.
Ian, can I ask a question on this? I think this is a good sentiment. The way I read it is sort of like it's because we set TCEYs that estimating fishing intensity is uncertain. But actually, it's just that estimating fishing intensity is uncertain, right? Whether or not we set a TCEY is just a hard thing to do, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. Although I make that distinction because there are fisheries management approaches that attempt to manage F directly and don't set catch limits, but yet set effort limits. And so in this case, we are setting catch limits, which then have corresponding fishing mortality uncertainty. But perhaps that's a distinction that's not important here.
Okay,
I think the way it's
intensity, not mortality.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the way it's suggested here seems to work.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with it. It's fine.
Okay. All right, moving on. Paragraph 33, 34. Paragraph 35. I think there was a comment on this one. Paragraph 36. Paragraph 37. Now there's a new subparagraph C that's been added from the US.
Yeah, that was just intended to capture the conversation. I think it speaks for itself, but happy to answer any questions.
Next section, section 7, paragraph 30, 38 and 39. And this is where we'll insert those paragraphs from above because they're relevant to the harvest decision table section. Okay, next section 8.1, paragraph 40 has a minor edit. Paragraph 41. And paragraph 42, there is some text from Canada, so I'll pass it to Canada.
One of yours.
Sorry, we can't hear you very well.
Peter, was this one of yours?
No.
The text that was chosen by and then brackets with ...
I don't believe it's mine unless I accidentally did something weird, but I sent it, which I don't see would probably within the realm of possibility.
Okay. So we'll delete the by. The other numbers, so it's less than or equal to, and the 15%. I just want to confirm that might have come from Ray.
It did. I think the text might have been a carryover from the document. The 10% applied last year to 4 CDE, but it didn't apply this year, so I changed it to 15%.
Perfect. Okay, paragraph 43. And then in paragraph 44, some edits from Canada. And the US. Edits from both parties in this paragraph. So if I can help, I think the regulatory areas in brackets was a suggestion or uncertainty from Canada, and the end of the sentence was from the US. Canada also had an edit to that end of that sentence, but it became redundant with the US edits.
So I don't think the edits at the end are from us.
It was from me.
Okay.
We didn't see them either.
Okay. Regulatory area in brackets. Where did that come from?
That's from Canada.
It's fine.
So that's just to clarify areas, that it's within regulatory areas.
Presumably it was for clarity, although I'm having a bit of trouble figuring out who did it. I assume it was just for clarity.
Okay. So we'll remove areas and insert regulatory areas. And then the rest of the sentence is just for clarification from Ray. And I think there was one additional edit from Canada in there that became redundant with the edits. So are you okay with the end of that sentence now?
I'm okay
Yep.
with it.
Okay. Okay. Moving on to paragraph 45. No comment where it's from, so I'm not going to dare say. Anyone identify 45B, subparagraph B?
Yeah, I'll claim it. At least part of it.
All okay with it? Okay. Not hearing anything. Paragraph 46. Paragraph 47. Paragraph 48.
So in 48, I have a question about the sentence, once bids are received and evaluated in February 2024. I thought that Kayla had said the aim would be to make decisions in early February. So bids would be received and evaluated prior to that, but I may have heard wrong.
So the addition here specifically refers to 4, C, D, and E, and the intention was to get you a briefing note by the end of the week or by the end of next week for you to make a decision on whether you wanted 4, C, D included in the tender specs. But for the initial RFT, we would include all options 1, 2, and 3, which included the charter areas in 4A and B. But we
Okay, but I think what you're raising is a different issue than what I was raising. In that third sentence, in addition, option 4 shall be included in the RFT process, but is not yet endorsed. Well, then the following sentence, once bids are received and evaluated in February 2024. I was just trying to verify whether that's the right time frame. I thought from Kayla's comments earlier that the bids would be received and evaluated prior to February.
No, we usually make the deadline for the tenders just after the annual meeting, which allows us to have the tender brief with potential FIS captains at the annual meeting. So I think it was going to be the 3rd of February or 2nd of February is the deadline for tenders, and so they would be evaluated immediately following that.
Okay.
Okay, paragraph 49.
Actually, I'm going to raise it.
Sorry, we didn't catch that.
Just for a moment. I think we had a comment or a question on 48. We had some sort of mixed understandings of this one, in that I thought what we had sort of landed on was we'd agreed to put certain options into the request for proposals, but not yet agreed on a design. And when I read 48, it says we agreed on an optimized design. And so I wondered if the wording here actually reflected the nature of our discussion. I had understood that a decision on the design is going to come later in time based on the things that are referred to later in this clause and what we get back of the bids. So that was kind of one piece around the wording. And then maybe on a related note, just this sort of like, maybe I missed it, but I didn't recall that as the 6 commissioners, we'd sort of agreed that we would, at a minimum, be pursuing 1, 2, and 3, and just sort of like living with that additional financial risk for 2024 based on the projections of costs associated with that. So I wanted to confirm whether I'm the only one who had a different understanding or not.
Well, Neil, I'll say I came away from the conversation thinking that we had agreed on options 1, 2, and 3, and that option 4 and the possibility of adding a new option for area 4 CDE were up in the air. Are you feeling more equivocal about options 2 and 3?
I think maybe at a minimum, my observation would be, I don't know that we maybe formalized that to the degree maybe we should have. I have been thinking about it more as what would go forward to the bid process, and then we would make decisions about what design we thought made sense. I think if the balance of the commissioners sort of read and understood the conversation differently, something I can sort of support, but that had been how I understood our discussion, was more about what we put to the request for proposals stage.
Well, I think we have room to come to some consensus on it here, if regardless of our earlier conversations. So if it would be better to characterize 48 as essentially applying solely for purposes of putting out the RFT, that the commissioners agreed to request proposals for options 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and potentially also a new option for regulatory area 4 CDE. Would that more closely capture your understanding?
It would, John. That is how I understood it, but recognize I'm one of 6 people here, so
that changes the timeline for making the decision. I guess my view of it was that I agree with Neil that we didn't formally adopt it, and we probably should, because it's pretty important. So like you said, John, I think we should discuss that here and see if we're comfortable with that, because as Neil correctly pointed out, if we adopt 1, 2, and 3, that's an additional 109,000 risk. I think David, in his earlier comments, as we went through this, we're already assuming quite a bit of risk regardless. If we just carry on with option 1, like to the tune of, I think you said 400,000. I guess I view options 1, 2, and 3 as the minimum that we need to do for 2024. And I guess I didn't say it. That was my view at the time.
Chair, if I could just chime in there as well. Just logistically, the more charter areas that we leave for decision in February, the harder it becomes logistically to secure bait, staff, and vessels. And so even though we may well have tenders in at that point for some of these areas, we may not at that point be able to find staff to put on them if we're leaving those contracts that late. Because typically we will contract with a minimum number of set line survey specialists ahead of time and hope that the others do not take up other observer work. We also have had comments from the Research Advisory Board to let them know as soon as possible if they're successful, because often they will head north early using different gear than what we use as part of our standardized set line survey. And once they leave port, they won't come back for additional gear. So I guess that's just a word of caution, just to try and secure as much as we can at this point so that we can put out those bids, buy the bait, and secure the staffing contracts for that minimum. And I would suggest that it's heading towards 1, 2, and 3. But if that's not, we just need confirmation of that as soon as possible.
And Dave, we have the correct understanding that, in terms of the risk we might be assuming, I think you'd estimated it could be around $450K plus or minus for our cost neutral option 1. The addition of 2 and 3 would bump that to something in the neighborhood of like $560K. That we'd be potentially anticipating. And then there was, I think, some discussion later on about the potential to maybe put savings from a renewed lease towards this. Do we know anything about that, or we don't yet? Just in terms of how much risk we would actually be sort of absorbing with agreeing now that 1 to 3 would be a minimum.
Okay, so thanks through the chair. Yes, 1 to 3 would bring us to, as you said, approximately 550,000 plus or minus. Noting that I'm going to correct that. Options 2 and 3 would be about $110,000 is what we're estimating the additional cost. Now, for the plus or minus on that would be what, 5% or so on that individual number. So yes, if option 1 was to lose the full amount, that in terms of our estimated error, that would be about 450,000. Then worst case scenario for option 2 and 3, you lost another 130. But again, that's sort of the worst case scenario. In terms of the lease, we do have the approximate numbers of savings, which Andrea can run you through. The caveat to that is that we have no agreement from US State Department that they would provide us those funds, noting that we essentially provide them with the lease costs, and then normally they will provide that as a contribution. We would be asking for funds that are outside that headquarters lease responsibility.
Actually, Dave, I thought I had seen from Dimitri that he got approval that, essentially those funds are earmarked for IPHC and state would be okay with them being repurposed within IPHC.
Okay, I haven't seen that one or have read that one, but that'd be exciting if that's the case. So look, I'm going to pass to Andrea, who's just going to quickly verbalize what those savings may look like in the next 3 years, for example.
Thank you. So the savings in 2024, we will receive 3 months of free rent with the negotiated blend and extend lease. That equals $93,990. In 2025, we will have 1 month of free rent, and that is $32,273. And in 2026, we will have annual savings of $119,124. The cost difference is because it is a blend and extend. So we're blending the next 2 years with those free months of rent, 4 months of free rent, and then our lease terms drop down to what we are paying. So of the next 12 years, we will save $1.6 million.
So I guess we'll need to just verify my memory from what the State Department has said, but I thought that was the indication that we could apply, at least for this year, apply the savings to this.
And that would make sense for this year because the contribution's already been paid for the lease in full for 2024.
Yeah. Yep. So back to the broader question here. Again, my takeaway from our earlier conversation was we were all okay with options 1, 2, and 3. But we do have the opportunity to dial that back if we don't have consensus amongst the 6 of us.
I appreciate taking a few extra moments from my part. I'm willing to support 1, 2, and 3 being sort of like what we agree to now in light of some of that information about where we might find a bit of extra money and so on. It sounds like it will also provide the Secretariat with more certainty to work with in terms of securing all of the survey participation and date and so on.
Yeah, John, I support it as far as the reasons that Neil just talked about. I think we need to provide some certainty for the Secretariat rather than delaying the decision till the end of January. I think that's too late. And so we need to decide now if we're comfortable or not. I'm comfortable to see it.
Okay, so does that mean the language in 48 is okay as written?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that clarity. Okay, paragraph 49. I believe these came from the US.
I don't think so.
That's all right. It came from Ray. That's all right. Thank you.
I just reorganized it to make it read better.
Good, good. Okay, paragraph 50 and 51. '52 has a minor correction. 53. 54. 55, an edit from Canada.
I think an edit and maybe a comment, and I think it was me who offered it at the time, just whether we want to sort of go any further than this in the idea that, we're interested in exploring other options for funding the survey that, for example, could leverage contributions from external parties.
Could just get clarity that the text in red already encapsulates what you're looking for.
So I'm curious about the text in blue. Oh, well, now it's gone. So my curiosity has ended.
The reason I raised it earlier and here is just, okay, if this is a longer term issue and we have at least uncertainty about the ability to secure additional resources from contracting parties, do we want to explore other means of drawing funding in to support the survey? We have examples on the Canadian side where, for example, industry makes contributions either in kind or financially, or there are allocations of specific allocations of fish that are set aside to fund science activities like surveys. I mean, I'm interested in whether some of those could be ways of supporting the survey. And so the idea was, do we want to capture something about, sort of exploring those options here? The way it's worded now sounded sort of, I don't know, a little more passive to me.
Neil, I'm open to the concept. It sounds like what you're raising, though, would mean a request to the Secretariat to explore something, to look at the feasibility of some other options. Is that what you're getting at?
Possibly. I mean, I'm conscious of how much we asked the secretary to do, but it could also, for example, be the contracting parties provide examples of approaches that have been used domestically. So it could be both. Maybe we need a bit more time to sort of talk about this than we want to spend now. I'm fine with that. I think there's an idea here that I would like to pursue. It does not need to be today, and it doesn't necessarily need to be captured here, but I think it's worth exploring just because we are struggling with funding.
Okay, well, I'm fine with, essentially putting a pin in that and having a follow-up conversation at some point.
Okay, great. So we won't include it in this version of the report, but maybe that's something we can pick up at the annual meeting as well.
Well, before we strike that, I do think that we should be engaging upon this now. I think that it's a combination of both the parties and the secretariat engaging on this, and I think it's a combination of when the parties contribute more, as well as potentially industry and having back or joint ventures, whatever. I do think we need to explore this sooner than later, and I think it'd be good to capture at this point in time.
Okay, so what if we just said the commission agreed to further discuss whether there are other options for funding the survey that may leverage contributions from external parties? Oh, yeah, okay.
So it's external parties, but also both parties need to explore this. And I guess just, I think we both need to do it now.
Can I just get some wording clarification?
Okay, what about this? What if 55 changed? Instead of adding, we just said in 55, the commission agreed that supplementary funding is likely needed to sustain the FIS moving forward. And I know you don't like two capital words in there, but and agreed to explore options for funding from contracting parties and external sources, something like that.
I like it, and I think that recognition of our predicament is really important.
So could you just repeat that language again, Neil? So the commission agreed that supplementary funding
is likely needed. What you have in 55, the commission acknowledged that supplementary funding is likely needed to sustain the FIS moving forward. I don't think we need the rest of that. And then agreed to explore options for funding. Maybe we could just go e.g. from contracting parties or external partners.
I think it covers the.
And then that would replace what's in 55 now.
Perfect. Okay.
That's good. Thanks, Neil, for pursuing that.
Paragraph 56.
It actually should be February 4th, just looking at the calendar.
The next section, paragraph 57 and 58. Paragraph 59 and 60. Then we have a new paragraph. From Canada. Okay.
So, Paul, I'm not trying to understand the implications of this, whether it's intending to convey that that we're only interested in research that feeds into the stock assessment specifically.
No, I don't think so. It's not getting at trying to say that. I don't think, John. It's to provide a little more clarity as we talked about earlier. So this may be redundant. So we want to see a direct linkage to the research and to the likely impacts of that on stock assessment. So I guess the question I was just asking Anne-Marie, she had raised whether you needed leaders.
If we presented sort of give you a heads up to commercial sex ratio is likely to most likely to affect changing in natural mortality. Sorry. So thinking of what at the work meeting, Ian presented a table that was around this impacts locations, and it was to help the commissioners have an idea that, like in the past, expect the commercial sex ratio to have a big impact on what you're going to see. Expect to have the natural mortality updates to have a big impact on what you're going to see. So, and then what also functionality of some of those impacts if when you get the additional information on growth and reproduction and survival, how that would feed into the information that's presented to the commissioners when you make your decision. Didn't have a specific thought as to where it would best be placed in terms of putting in front of the commissioners.
Did that help, John, at all?
It was a little hard to hear, Anne-Marie, but I think the gist that I got seemed to be an interest in discussing the relevance of the biological research activities for the stock assessment. Is that right?
Yeah, sort of essentially to give the commissioners a heads up for what might be the biggest impact coming up, like the difference that the commercial sex ratio made to what you guys saw. And that puts in front of the commissioners. And same last year with the natural mortality estimates. So just a heads up for where you would expect and when you might expect those changes.
Okay, so I guess I would put this back on the Secretariat as to whether the language suggested here is clear enough for you to know what you would need to do.
Yes, thank you. If I understood correctly, because it was a little hard to hear the explanation, but I heard mention of the information paper that was provided at the work meeting. And in fact, there's a published version of this information paper in the documentation for the SRB 23, the last SRB meeting that took place in September. From what I understood, this may be the place where additional information regarding how that information will feed into stock assessment should be placed. And I noticed that in addition, there was another comment earlier in that that information should also be incorporated into the 5-year program of integrated research and monitoring document. So we take note of that, and please correct me if I didn't understand correctly what you were implying.
I think you captured it correctly, Joseph.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on then to section 10, paragraph 61, 62, 63. Then in section 10.1, we have paragraph 64, 65, and 66. 10.2, 3, and 4, we have paragraph 67, 68, and 69. In section 11, we have paragraph 70. And then in paragraph 71, the US suggested edits to 71C, and we just tried to word that or craft it slightly. So please review.
Looks fine here.
Okay. Paragraph 71. Sorry, 72. Section 12, other business, paragraph 73 and 74. Paragraph 75. Then on the national reporting template, paragraph 76 and 77. Okay, not seeing any other edits, Chair, on paragraph 78. Just need confirmation that you're happy for the report to be adopted with the edits that have just been indicated.
Yeah, and Dave, I would just note that we, in the list of attendees below, there were 4 U.S. advisors listed who actually were not participants.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll make sure they're deleted.
Okay.
Okay. Are we happy for the report to be adopted?
Works for me.
Yes, we are, Dave.
Perfect.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. So we'll finalize that today, and I'll email that all to you this evening so that you can reread everything. Is there anything else you wanted to finish with, Chairs?
For me, anything for you, Paul?
No, we're good. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners, and thanks to all the staff behind the scenes as well who've supported everything. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I know.
So long.